Hello and welcome, everybody. We're about to start this webinar since the time is 1 o'clock in Sweden and 2 o'clock in EET. So very welcome to this webinar on sports events and sustainability in practice. My name is Charlotte Sandwall and I am working at the Swedish Sports Confederation, and I'm going to be your host today. This webinar is the second in a series of 3 on sustainable sports events. And the webinar is arranged as a part of a Baltic RECoord project. That is a project that focuses on increasing knowledge and developing sustainable sports events within the Baltic Sea region. So besides Sweden, we have representatives from Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. And the project is financed by the Swedish Institute. And besides these webinars, we also arrange 3 workshops where we have the possibility to get deeper into working with sustainable sports events. If you want to know more about the project or the workshop, the next workshop is the 1st of June. We will send out contact information to your country representative after the webinar. We will also send out the slides from today's speaker. And for the record, I would say that this webinar is recorded and will be posted on YouTube in a few days. And we will send out the link to the webinar along with the slides and the contact information if you want to look at it again, or if you want to share with your colleagues or other people that you think may gain something from watching this. With that said, I would like to tell you that today we have the privilege to listen to Rika Rakic, who's representing a great international sports event that have made sustainability a main part of their arrangement. We were supposed to listen to Johan Strid, Secretary General for the Swedish Paralympic Committee, but he's unfortunately sick, so he is not able to join us here today. But as I said, Rika Rakic is here, and she is head of sustainability during the FIS Alpine World Championship in Åre that was arranged earlier this year. And she will share some experience, difficulties and challenges, but also gains that they have seen when they have made sustainability a main part of their arrangement. And before I will let Rika in, I will just tell you, and for some of you this is not new information, but if you have any questions for Rika, you may use the chat function that you find below to your right. And you may ask any type of questions you have for Rika, and I will gather them and ask them after her presentation. You may also use the chat to ask each other questions, or if you have any questions for me. So feel free to use the chat as you like. With that said, I would like to welcome Rika, our first speaker. Welcome. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here, so thank you for the invitation. I hope everyone can hear me well. And I think someone will probably show my slides at some point, but maybe before we go there, a couple of words as an introduction to myself. As Charlotte said, I am the head of sustainability at the recently concluded FIS Alpine World Ski Championships in Åre 2019. I come from a winter sports background. I'm actually Finnish, so I feel a little relation to you all around the sea here. That was where I grew up. Have spent quite a few years outside of Finland more recently, and also did a career or served 8 years almost at the FIS, which is the International Ski Federation, based out of Oberhofen in Thun, Switzerland. So I worked for the International Federation and then left a few years back, and since then have done a number of projects. Also worked with a couple of bidding cities, where obviously the Olympic environment is one where sustainability is becoming more and more important for various reasons. but we don't need to go into those, I think, in this discussion. However, I also had the pleasure of being part of the experience in Åre from the very, very beginning. Indeed, from the first bid that wasn't successful for the 2017 edition of the FIS World Championships, and then continuing on to the successful bid, which saw Åre being elected as the host in May, or actually beginning of June in 2014. So I actually have been part of the whole cycle from the start of bidding campaign to the very last day of the event, and have seen a group of people grow to a very large group of people. Exciting development in itself, but having seen also thousands of volunteers join us in that adventure. So I will reflect on a couple of things as being part of that event for the whole cycle, but mostly we will be speaking about the topic of sustainability. And that is something that definitely marked the event from various perspectives, from the organization, but also communication. We definitely made it a big focus of the way we were going about the organization of the event. And interestingly enough, it was something that we decided from the very beginning. Now, I think you all should be seeing a first slide now, which shows the logo of the event. And I will now start by giving you a little bit of background. I'm not assuming that you know too much about the Alpine World Ski Championships, but it actually is the second largest winter sports event after the Olympic Winter Games by the number of TV viewers, or also by the number of participating nations. So that we set a new record. It's 75 participating nations that we were pleased to welcome to Åre in February, a new FIS record for that event. It is a 2-week event, 11 competitions where medals are awarded, close to 500 athletes and 7,000 accredited people. So it certainly is a large undertaking with 1,400 volunteers from 37 countries, so very international in that. And we were happy to have 102,000 spectators in the arena. The official number of visitors was approximately 136,000 because there were a number of people that only visited the medal ceremonies or side events or the sponsor village. But in the arena, watching the competitions, we were able to have just over 100,000 people. It also is an event with a large budget and had required a substantial investment in facilities over a period of 5 years, which is the period that we had from the election to actually delivering the event. Now, what we did was not just to organize an event. We felt as the core team that was there from the beginning that we needed to have a larger mission. It was just not to have an event for event's sake, but we wanted to achieve something with that event. And that's why we set ourselves a vision that was inspiring. It was difficult to reach, but we wanted to inspire the world to ski. And obviously, skiing is a sport that relies on an environment that allows for the sport to take place. So it requires cold temperatures, it requires snow. It's also a sport that's not possible for everyone in the world. So it was a high goal to inspire the entire world to ski, but that's what we set out to do. And as part of that mission, we also felt that we needed to have some kind of positive legacies that were left after the event. One of those was certainly in the area of infrastructure, but we wanted the community to think that they had also gained by the event taking place in Åre, which is obviously a very small village. Actually, there are only 3,000 people who live there. So we wanted to make sure that when we were planning the event, we would always think in terms of what is left with the community over a longer period of time. And we define typically that period of time as until at least the next World Championships that take place in Norway. The 2019 edition was already the third time, because in 1954, that was the very first edition, and 2007, only 12 years before, the second edition took place. So this was the third time, and certainly one of the goals in the future, it hasn't been determined when, but the community of Åre and region of Jämtland would like to host another World Ski Championship in probably 2030, 2031, whatever the date will become. And even currently, obviously, we won't hear from Johan today, but if 2026 Olympic Winter Games come to Sweden, Åre would be the host of the alpine skiing, snowboard, and freestyle skiing event. So it would see another big event coming to town. And some of the work that was done in the bigger projects, especially some facilities that were built, that they would certainly be useful for any large event in the future. So Arena House doesn't really mean too much to you, but we created an additional building in the Finnish area of the hills, and that will have facilities available for any large event in the future. There's also substantial investment done by the ski resort to ensure that ski racers from young to developing to young elite athletes can train in good conditions, as well as further positioning the resort that lives from the sport of skiing as a tourist destination, has that element of being the home of ski racing in Northern Europe. So I think it's always important to think about legacy of an event as you plan it and as you go about organizing it, because sustainability, if you ask me, is really the way how you organize something. And for us, we really wanted to take a pragmatic approach to sustainability and consider sustainability one of the core principles how we organized it. This was something that was decided very early on. One of our missions was to ensure that whatever we do, we organize that with great care to the environment. But then one of the first decisions taken by the board of Åre 2019, already in December 2015, so just a little over a year after we really started with the planning activities, that we would organize this event, Åre 2019, February 2019, in accordance with the sustainability standard called ISO 21221. I don't know how much that means to you, but basically it's a standard that is specifically created for sustainable events after the London Games in 2012. And it allows you to create a very comprehensive, holistic approach to event organization that ensures that everyone involved in the event is contributing. Now, making sure that we are sustainable in our approach is basically a no-brainer, given where we were in terms of our environment. Jämtland, as a region, has set itself quite high goals in various areas of when it comes to sustainability or protection of environment, or as a resort lives from the sport. And we were a bunch of skiers who obviously all were very aware of the fact that the winters are getting shorter, there is less snow, there's more extreme weather. So the whole team involved in the organization obviously were not surprised by the fact that we had to all take our own responsibility in this journey and contribute to us protecting our winters for future generations. So the reasons for and the rationale for making for sustainability a great focus were there. Now it was just a question how to do this. We then decided that this is not somewhere where we need to start with a blank sheet. We took the guidance from the International Olympic Committee, where obviously the FIS, International Ski Federation, is the largest of all winter federations and gets a lot of guidance that is given to the Olympic movement by the IOC. So we thought that it makes only sense that we would look up the sustainability strategy of the IOC, and indeed they have already defined 5 areas there to focus on. And we chose to use the same priorities, we just kind of tailor them for our use. We decided that instead of construction and infrastructure, because we didn't have to actually do much construction, we only extended one building. The arena house was actually an existing building already there. Our biggest area of concern in the infrastructure was that we would make sure that any temporary infrastructure is as sustainable, and operations for those pieces of infrastructure would be as sustainable as possible. In the resource side, we also felt that our greatest contribution would really be around the sourcing and reduction of waste by reducing already in the beginning and recycling as much as possible. Mobility, this is certainly a big area of focus for us because of the location of Åre. It's not exactly close to a big city. It's about 100 kilometers from Östersund. It's about 140 kilometers from Trondheim. So we knew that a lot of people would have to travel to Åre rather than just being able to decide on the day they needed to make a long-term decision to come and attend our event. People, we felt, was an important element because of the community. The small community needed to feel they were contributing, they were part of the event, and we wanted to make sure that they felt it was a benefit for them. And then climate for us was certainly one of the overarching elements of this, and we feel it plays a role in all of the other 4 priority areas, be it infrastructure, be it mobility, or maybe even people's decisions about things. So Protect Our Winters is obviously an organization who we partnered with, but it's also a bit of a motto for us. So these were the 5 areas, and these were the priority areas because we wanted to keep it rather simple. Pragmatic sustainability was something that we kept talking about all the time. We didn't want to aim for too complicated constructs or requiring 100% change because we thought that the risk of failure would be much greater than when we kept it pragmatic, practical, and relatable to people. Now, I mentioned the first decision taken by the board was in December 2015. This slide shows the timeline for the last 18 months, and you will have to imagine, obviously, that there's been a number of milestone checkpoints for us before November 2018. But I just thought it would be most useful to see that when we had already done a high-level planning, we were very much in the middle of a detailed planning, and then transitioned into operations and execution, that we had a number of different milestones for sustainability as well. And many of them revolved around the ISO 2012-1, such as having at least 4, you see 3 on this, but there was 1 before, basically 4 meetings with the auditor, gap analysis in November 2018. Then we had an actual document analysis in March. Actually, it was probably already April 2018. So the gap analysis, sorry, is 2017. Then March 2018 was the document analysis, and then the certification audit, where we actually was a quite extensive 2 days where every single department had to discuss their plans and their activities in implementing sustainability according to our goals. It was then in mid-October 2018. So that was 3 months before the event that we were actually able to say that we have been certified. But that didn't mean we were finished, because we also had auditors visit us in February to check on how we actually we're executing the plans that we said that we would execute. Now, I'm spending a lot of time on this ISO certification. This is not to basically advertise it, but I'm just doing it because I thought that it was one of the key reasons why we were able to really ensure that the entire operation was following a certain methodology in implementing our sustainability program and meet those goals that we had set ourselves. It was also very good for us then to hear that the auditors that saw that we were able to implement a truly holistic approach to sustainability from the very start. And we were able to implement the dimensions of sustainability, which I think you've probably all heard about, the environmental being the base, but then there's the social sustainability, there's the economic sustainability considerations. In every single decision that you take, you somehow have to consider those three elements. And most of the time, it ends up being a balance of the three that you need to consider. So that process requires a lot of documentation, and a lot of people are scared about the amount of documentation, but I think there are also easy ways of doing this, and I would say I offer on this occasion to say that anything we have created or produced, you're welcome to have, because we certainly think that it's only beneficial to share the lessons learned and the knowledge gained with any other organizers so that more events can benefit from a more sustainable approach. Now, what we felt was very important for us, we had those 5 areas, the priority areas, but then we also felt that we needed to set some goals in each of them that would kind of drive us to make sure that we are doing the right things in each priority area. Some of these goals ended up being cross-cutting because it's very difficult to say that within fossil fuel free, for example, that it would only fit within mobility, because it certainly has an implication on resources or infrastructure as well. Now, fossil fuel free became one of the greatest learnings of this whole endeavor that we engaged in Aura, because fossil fuel free is certainly something that is not typically set as a goal for an event. In fact, we were the first World Championships, as far as we know, that ever attempted that. And we have to thank the leading role of the Jämtland region and the land students in this area, because Jämtland as a region has set themselves a goal to be fossil fuel free region by 2030. Now, 2019 is obviously 11 years before that, but it was a very, very helpful process to go through, because we also were able to share this journey with our colleagues from the Biathlon World Championships in Östersund, which took place just a week or so ago. I think they finished on the 17th of March. So the 2 World Championships were together in this mission that was shared with us and the region, as well as the municipalities of the respective championships. And that was all good, because that allowed us to benefit from a lot of people's knowledge. Otherwise, we would be quite lost at this challenge, because this definitely was something that we found out that 2019, we are potentially a little early, that not everything is possible at this time. And specifically, I can give a few examples of where that became clear is when you start breaking down what it means to be fossil fuel free as an event. It really has an impact on a variety of areas, from transport, where the fuels are obviously very often fossil fuel based, such as diesel fuels being used in cars or buses or trucks or shuttles, or at the same time, fossil fuels are being used in generators that you typically require in winter environment, especially. And then when you start working through that, there's a rule at FIS, for example, that a safety rescue helicopter is required. And today there is not a single helicopter that is, for safety reasons, approved to fly on the non-fossil fuel. So we basically found out all that as we went, and in the end, we had to say that fossil fuel-free in 2019 is a great vision, but not feasible. So we ended up then calculating, and I think I still haven't got the final data, but we estimate that we ended up being about 63% fossil fuel-free, just because in certain areas we had no choice. We had to rely on the fossil fuels. Climate neutral is another one, sometimes a kind of a buzzword, and this was one of the latest commitments that we took on because we felt it was something that we needed to do right if we were to do that. And we were very lucky to have a sponsor join us to enable us to actually be able to say that we are climate neutral when it comes to our own event-created emissions. And that was Vattenfall, who's joined us relatively late in the game with the premise that if we are climate neutral, we'll come on board and we'll be your smart energy partner, and they will join us in actually offsetting the emissions that we couldn't reduce through our own efforts. The other two, recycled waste, 50%, and sustainable means of transport are a kind of industry benchmark from other big ski events. Then the last one is quite interesting, and I'll give you a little bit more specific example of that shortly, because we made a very special decision about our kitchen. So some of the highlights of the work that we did, which enabled us to kind of work our way through towards those commitments, were, for example, a very good project that we did together with the Luleå University and some students there that were finishing up their master's studies, as well as an international consulting company, Qantas, who helped us pre-event already 18 months before the event estimate what would be our carbon footprint, because that was the basis on which we could then focus our efforts and not to put too much time on things that we wouldn't have a great impact on our carbon footprint. Instead, we, for example, identified that after transport, which we knew tends to be a very big contributor in anything having to do with ski sports, the second biggest area of carbon footprint emissions creation was food and beverage for us. So we took that as an area of focus for us. We also then pursued corporations or certifications with a couple of other things beyond the ISO certification, which is a very helpful checklist and team that are very experienced in different areas of event organization and making that more environment friendly. The organization called Protect Our Winters is an advocacy organization that tries to help and create behavioral change, which I think is actually the reason why we did most of our activity in the communication side. For us to protect and save our winters, the only way to actually get there is to have a lot of people join us in the efforts that we are undertaking ourselves. Cooperation with the Federation of Swedish Farmers was one of the bases for us being able to reduce our footprint in the food and beverage area, and then the certification for both caught and farmed fish was another area where we had help from those kind of industry expert organizations. Now, food and beverage, I mentioned this a couple of times. Why I think it's a really good example of how we went about the holistic approach to sustainability is that we actually took the decision after a lot of economic financial analysis to create our own kitchen. We had a massive kitchen in the basement of that new extension arena building, where we had approximately 30 chefs working with another 100 people helping them to cook all the meals for the volunteers, for the VIPs, for some of the public catering, for the media. And they ended up delivering thousands and thousands of meals. But because we had full control over it, we could not only manage the cost, but we could also make a lot of decisions that enabled a much higher degree of sustainability in terms of transport, in terms of managing food waste because of our own menu planning, and also making decisions about things that typically would be left to a caterer or some kind of catering company. So this was a massive undertaking, but from our approach, we thought that it was really the right one for us. Now I'm going to give you a couple of examples. It's too short time to go into the details of every single priority area, but per priority area, there are a couple of examples of what we did. In terms of infrastructure, for example, what you see here is that extension of the arena building, and we, together with Vattenfall, actually have, and the Swedish Ski Federation, have installed solar panels on top of that building, which will be a permanent, obviously, legacy for the community and for that building. We also work together with Jämtkraft to ensure that this whole area of the arena and the Finnish area is connected to district heating, fjärrvärme, those in Swedish. That was another renewable energy solution because all the energy through that source is made of renewable sources. We then also, in terms of resources, we worked very intensely with the municipality of Åre. And to the right, you see an image of a recycling station. Unfortunately, prior to approximately October 2018, Åre town or village, as they call it, didn't have any recycling in the public areas. But now, after the cooperation that we established with the municipality, those recycling stations are now in place, and they will be serving the community for the future years. And we actually purchased a number of those, and we gave it to the municipality to make sure that they extend beyond the actual real town area to other parts of the Åre commune, which actually is massive. Another example about mobility, we were able to partner with our official car sponsor, Audi. It happened that Audi came out with its new electric vehicle called e-tron, and our entire shuttle service was provided by Audi's new electric vehicles. Now, it was pretty cold for the first week, at least, of the championships, so we certainly put those new vehicles to great tests in terms of how many kilometers they would go at one charging. But it was also part of this learning experience about fossil fuel-free traffic and transport. Not so easy to organize. It's possible maybe in Sweden today, but I can imagine in a number of countries in Central Europe where it would not be possible because the whole infrastructure for electric vehicles is not there at all. Yet another mobility-related topic and fossil fuel-free related topic is the fact that we partnered with a company called Kolapitoil, which is a provider of a fuel called HVO, which is a diesel substitute that doesn't have any fossil fuel. So this company actually ended up setting up a temporary gas station serving only this fossil fuel-free fuel. All our drivers that were not driving an electric vehicle would have a card to go and fill up there. We also promoted this option to all the teams coming in, and Europe Car, which was our official rental car agency, only provided cars that were approved for use of HVO. Also something very new to most of the people in the ski community, because this is not widely spread, but was a key component of our fossil fuel-free strategy. We also provide alternative options, such as electric bikes. Europe Car had some of their own. We had our own from a company called Raw Bike, to ensure that the team, workforce, volunteers were able to move around the town. Example of people and how we engaged the community was that we had a number of different schools that partnered with us. This is an image from a skiing side event that was organized by a local event school. We worked with that event school with, I think, 3 different graduating classes, ended up being part of our organization, and they actually organized most of our side events. We also had a number of local restaurant and hotel schools students helped with that big kitchen that we had. And also elementary schools, a number of them from the municipality were involved in used our event as part of their curriculum during the current school year. Finally, I have an example of an image of Vattenfall. As I mentioned already, they joined as a smart energy partner, and they helped us set up a number of additional vehicle charging stations. This is one that shows electric snowmobiles that were also used during the event for people transport purposes across the lake. Many people have never seen one, but they certainly exist. So here we go. These are a couple of examples. It would take another half an hour if I went through a bunch of others, but just to give you a taste of what we tried to do. Finally, I mentioned that behavioral change we felt was one of the important goals for us. We felt the whole event actually served as a platform for promoting that. We partnered with the two organizations I already mentioned. We also had a number of guest services and what we call green team members informing the visitors about what we're doing in this area. And we hope that a lot of people are able to see that if everyone does a little bit to promote more sustainable ways of living, we gain a whole lot more than a couple of people go 100% and sleep and live under the bridge and eat vegetarian. So this is really, I think, the end goal for what we were after. Now, I'm unfortunately not able to show you a whole lot of the final figures because we're still in the process of collecting the numbers to see if it was 63 or 65% fossil fuel free. What I feel that the main goals that we set ourselves that are on the slide in terms of being a benchmark, increasing awareness and leaving a legacy for this, I can today already say I feel we have reach those goals. It's just a matter of how far and how close we got to those commitments that we made, which I'm still working on and will be published in a separate sustainability report this spring. And just final couple of slides I have about key success factors. I felt that these 5 things that I'm listed here are probably the key for us being able to do what we did, beginning with the support from the management team, from the board. If they hadn't been behind us, Endeavour wouldn't have gone anywhere. We also, especially our CEO, became one of the biggest sustainability ambassadors. And I was very proud of him being there and being able to talk to people almost week after week about what we're doing, and also convincing a number of sponsors to join us and to come up with different activation opportunities that are more sustainable and show the example. We also went through a number of test events. You've seen on that one timeline slide that we had the World Cup finals in March 2018. We had the Junior World Championships in March 2017. We also organized the World Cup in Stockholm. Every single one of those was an opportunity for us to do things better, also in the area of sustainability. In terms of program goals, we on purpose selected just a few because we felt that if the program for sustainability becomes a 15-page document, no one is even going to read it. So it's much easier for me to be pragmatic and have 5 things than have 25 of them. And then basically that sustainability became a platform that we kind of identified ourselves as. I've also included a link here to an article I wrote if someone wants to go and read more about the ISS sustainability standard. Feel free to click on that link. And then in terms of lessons learned, definitely a few here, and I'm sure there'll be another 10 to list. Behavioral change is really hard and it's very slow. So I think initially you have to focus on creating awareness, but I think hopefully the next step for people then is to start to reflect on that awareness and make changes in their own lives. I already mentioned that especially with the fossil fuel free, anything, it's really early, 2030 maybe, 2026, if the games come to Sweden, possibly. But today we definitely were learning and being pioneers in that area. And then I think I've said a few things. It's better to focus. rather than trying to do everything. And then we've also felt that you have to just keep talking about what you're doing. And that was especially crucial with the stakeholders. Some of the stakeholders are maybe not as advanced, but we were lucky to have Ski Star Ore, one of the most progressive ski resorts in the north, to have their support, as well as the Swedish ski team that are one of the most progressive national ski associations in this area. So together with their help, we, I think, are having a following now and are continuing this work. And I mentioned that with stakeholders, especially with sponsors, there's a lot of opportunity there. If you just kind of sit down and try to start to brainstorm on things, what you can do together to show different ways of doing and being more sustainable. And then I think oftentimes when there's a will, there's a way. And I would probably leave it with that. There's a couple of just images here about the communications efforts that we did to talk about different activities that we undertook. Or our website still, if you want to go, ore2019.com, is still up and running. A number of stories were written about the other various examples of things that we did that are not included in this presentation, so feel free to go visit. Now, I think that concludes what I had to say. I think I took about 35 minutes, but since we don't have Johan today with us, hopefully that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much, Rika, for a very interesting presentation. I think that it gave us a lot of inspiration and ideas about how to run a sustainable sport event. And thank you to all of you who have asked some questions for Rika, and we will tell them in just a second. I have one question, and you were touching it here in the end when you talked about lessons learned. But what would you say was the biggest or hardest major challenges throughout the process? Can you pinpoint some specific, or is it all of the lessons learned that you would like to point out in this case?
I think one of the things I certainly felt was challenging was was to explain to even my colleagues or some of the stakeholders what sustainability means and what it's not. Because a lot of times we talk about sustainability almost like a buzzword, but many people wouldn't be able to even describe or define it to you. So it was to go through the process with them about what it means for us as ORA 2019 and what it meant for every department. I would spend hours sitting down with my colleagues from sport or from accommodation or from events. It's like, okay, what does it mean to you now? These are our 5 areas. What can you do to contribute to these 5 areas in your department? So it was somewhat difficult for people initially to see what it could be. They would only with time, they started seeing opportunities. And I think in the end, and that was very crucial for us to be able to be certified too, is that everyone found their ways of contributing.
Perfect. Thank you. And I was also wondering, you were on to that one too, but were there any examples of sustainable improvements that you would like to do, but you were hindered by the rules of the FIS? You mentioned the helicopter. Is there any other examples of that?
No, I think that FIS doesn't have too many rules like that. They certainly are not preventing an event to be more sustainable. I don't know if they are promoting focusing it either, but they certainly are very, very willing to support our activities, and they were. I think what I found a little difficult was, or what if I had to do this again, what I would do differently maybe, I would certainly put even bigger focus on spectator or visitor transport. That's very challenging, especially when you're located in a far away or more of a remote community like Åre is, because everyone has to come there in some way. And that decision they take before they actually arrive, right? So it's something that you have to reach them. There's a message you have to make them aware of before they actually come. And that is provision of different options that are more sustainable, maybe more trains, that was not as easy as we thought to add trains to come to Åre. Sometimes buses, but maybe they were not willing to use HVO for reasons of cost or whatever. There are certain things there that I think in a more city environment are easier to resolve than in a remote community like Åre.
Okay, thank you. We had a question from Katarina in the audience, and she's curious if the FIS had any requirements regarding sustainability in the bidding process and all through the event, or was it your initiatives?
So the FIS requires an environmental report when you begin the bidding process. So when you submit your bid, you also submit an environmental report. But after that, there are no requirements formally from the FIS.
Okay. Just a second. And we have another question from Annika, and she wondered, did the media cover the sustainability work from the LOC and FIS, and how were the media divided, press, TV, etc.? If you talk about communication.
So in terms of communicating what we were doing, definitely there was a lot of attention, but I think that only came during event time when certain discussions in public discourse also were at their height. But we had already started our work in this area much earlier, and we continued to talk about it. As the event came closer, we were able to talk about more specific examples, and I think that's when the media also got more interested and certainly were really willing to cover it. I can say for myself, I did a lot of interviews. There was also obviously, it's the role of the media to be critical. So I also appreciate that because they will challenge you. But we also felt that we were prepared to explain why we did something, and when we didn't do something, why we didn't do it. So it becomes a dialogue. Sometimes, it's hard to just respond to media that say the best thing for Åre would have been not to have the event at all in terms of the carbon footprint. For us, the beginning assumption is already an event has carbon footprint. So what we're trying to do is trying to reduce it or manage it to the point possible.
Okay. Speaking of which, we have a question. You mentioned that only 50% was recycled, and I have a question from Jan Peter who seems that is a bit low. Can you please elaborate it?
Mm-hmm. I can, because the reason why I say 50% recycled is that in Sweden, the general waste, brännbart, when it's burned, a lot of people think, okay, that's great, it's recycled because it creates energy. But if you're really particular about that, it only is considered recycled if actually the residue that is created after the creation of the heat or energy is also recycled. And most plants that are doing this burning are not up to that level of standard, and certainly not the plant that the waste goes to from Åre in Sundsvall. So we can't count anything that goes to brännbart as recycled.
Okay. Next question, I'll take this and take it from Jan Peter as well. He had a lot of questions, but in what way did you educate the team in sustainability? You talked about the challenges in getting them on board in the practical work, but how did you educate them?
So in terms of management, we actually made sustainability one of the standing points of their weekly meetings. So the management team was very aware of that, and in terms of the hired staff, they had direct contact. I worked with every department. In terms of the workforce that came on board later, all the volunteers, we had an digital training program, and there was one module on sustainability. So everyone got an introduction to our program there. We also created a little video. If you go to our 2019 sustainability site, there's a little animation about 5 things that everyone can do to help us be more sustainable. It's about a 90-second video. So we try to use different tools and different approaches depending on the person.
Perfect. And then we have a question from Edvinas. What role have the athletes played in the promoting of the idea on sustainable sport event?
So Protect Our Winters was the organization that I mentioned that we worked with, and they actually have a number of athlete ambassadors. We created, I almost included as part of my presentation a video that we did with, we shot a number of videos with different athletes speaking about what they have done and what they do in their daily lives in terms of being more sustainable. And so we tried to select a couple of athletes that have already adopted sustainability as one of their areas of personal focus, and try to use them as almost like spokespeople for other people, for their fans and other teammates and things like that. So there's a number of them, and then Vattenfall actually also did the same. They selected 5 athletes from the Swedish team, and each of them had to select a couple of things that they are doing. Mats Olsson, for example, is planting trees. He's got a hashtag called Plantera med Olsson. So every time he gets a workout point, he plants a couple of trees. So we try to create kind of practical examples of what can be done, and show example to them of being role models.
Perfect. How did you involve the visitors in this work on sustainability?
So there were various things that we did. We had the sponsor village, which had a number of companies. We tried to do activations with all our partners that would allow us to showcase some of the sustainability efforts. Paul was on site. We also tried to communicate through our ticketing process. So if you bought a ticket online, that there was a big decision that they took when they decided how to travel to Åre, which would make a great difference in how much of a carbon footprint they would individually create. So that's definitely an area where I would love to have a discussion with people who have had more experience in reaching the spectators before they come, almost before they make the decision to attend an event, and how you can make different choices in that process.
Yeah. Thank you. We have questions from Patrick. A lot of good examples of working with environmental questions. Do you have any good examples on how you worked with social sustainability within the event?
So that was definitely an area where we probably could have done more. We felt that in a small community like that, our main focus needed to be with the people in that community, especially younger people, to provide them opportunities to engage. We also try to highlight the cultural heritage of the region in terms of the ceremonies and prizes or awards. We chose gifts that would reflect on the community. We also try to make sure that everyone was welcome in terms of coming to the event. So if you were a family with younger kids, the kids had a little different area closer to the athletes where they could attend under 120 centimeters height and be very close. We also certainly had an accessible event in terms of providing opportunities for those with disabilities to also join. That was just a number of examples, but I could also say that was probably somewhat more difficult for us to really engage in, and I would think that there are additional things that we could do come the games in 2026.
Perfect. There's a lot of questions and the time is about to run out, so I will just stop with, I will sum up with some more questions. First of all, will there be a report published about the event and the sustainability work that you have done? And if so, where and when can we find it?
Yes, I'm working on a study report. We will create a final report. It's a requirement also by the FIS to do. My ambition is to create a separate chapter, if you will, of that report that would be on sustainability and available separately. That will be done this spring time. I don't have a deadline, but I certainly would like to finish it before summer holidays.
Will it be published on the FIS Alpine World Championship webpage?
Yeah, I think we can upload it there. I don't know exactly how long that website will remain online, but initially it will be published there, and then potentially will go on to Swedish Ski Federation site or something like that.
Perfect. And then we have two more questions, and then we're going to end this. But considering the climate issue and the effect on sport, do you think that the FIS will sharpen their requirements regarding sustainability in the coming events, for example, in Italy and France 2021 and 2023?
I'm not sure if there'll be official requirements that will be enhanced. A federation like FIS, any international federation, will require everything to follow their processes, and those processes take some time. I can speak for Cortina, who were also on site in Ore, and they have an individual already identified. She's very experienced, has worked at the Milano Expo in the sustainability area, and she's, I would think, I can with some confidence say she's definitely hitting the ground running. She's very well on her way and has also the role and position that she needs to be able to impact things now when they are already constructing. And she's actually very, very involved in that already. I don't know much about the France event because I think they don't really have an organizing committee yet.
No, maybe they haven't gotten that far yet. It's a few years ahead. And the last question is, for those who watched this today and gotten inspired to arrange a sustainable sports events, but have no experience on working with sustainability, what would you recommend them to start with? Where do you begin?
Well, I already offered. I'm happy to share any documentation that we have, so they can email me in terms of having copies of our sustainability plan, or we have a manual that I created. The other thing I would do is definitely you'd have to always look at what your event is, what would fit with your event, and where can you make a difference. And it's better to start small and focused than try to do everything at once, especially if your event is an annual one and repeating. So then you can always improve. And I think that experience of having various test events was really, really important for us.
Thank you very much, Rika, and thank you for your presentations and for all your good answers. And I would also like to say thank you to all of you who participated today and listened to this. And if you want to learn more about the Baltic RECoord project or the upcoming workshop, the contact information to your country representative will be sent out after this webinar, together with Rika's slides and a link to this webinar when it's published on YouTube. With that said, I would like to say thank you again, Rika, and thank you for your time, and I hope to see you soon again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.